Hello, my name is Asha and welcome to this new edition of Business Africa, your magazine dedicated to the continent's business and economic news. As usual, you can win $150 in our Business Africa game. More details later, but first, today's top stories. The governance of electoral processes in Africa is finally on the path to progress, the fruit of long introspection.
All is not gloom and doom when it comes to the organisation of elections in Cameroon.
Healthy animals guarantee regular income. This could be the motto of these herders in Zambia.
The reporting system has become very efficient now. Sometimes, if there is an emergency, I might not meet my boss there and then to report the issue. But with this one, wherever he is, he'll get the report.
Spotlight on Tanzania and a microcredit system that allows small entrepreneurs to succeed in their projects.
So the time I come here, because we financed this lady, Agnes Moller, so we want to make sure that the business is going smoothly. So time to time we come here to monitor the business.
In Uganda, outgoing President Yoweri Museveni, who has been in power for 35 years, was re-elected with 58.6% of the votes after a heated campaign. And on Sunday, it was Niger's turn to call the polls to appoint its president. This year, no less than 14 elections are taking place in Africa. This is the time to take stock of a process that many believe is generally improved in terms of governance, despite persistent incidents and sometimes abuse. How is Africa asserting itself in the organization of these polls? This is what our journalist Abubakar Munchili tried to understand. Take a look. Guinea, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, DRC or the Central African Republic, and the list is long. No less than 20 countries on the African continent organized elections during the year 2020. These electoral battles, sometimes peppered with violence or protest, but which can also be quite calm in other cases, vary from one country to another. However, for many observers and citizens like here in Cameroon, Africa has made a real significant leap forward in the organization of elections, even if many challenges remain.
All is not gloom and doom when it comes to the organisation of elections in Cameroon. Before, everything was very complicated, as registration was not simple. Now there are announcements for the opening and closing of registrations, and back then the polling stations also were not easy to find, because sometimes they were in very hidden corners in the chiefdoms and impossible to be found by voters, and this problem sometimes led to uncontrollable situations. Also, on election day, since we know where the polling stations are found, the access to observers is possible. Among them, members of political parties. They can usually come and see what is happening in the polling stations. The minutes are signed by the representatives of political parties who are supposed to be there. So I think that these are real progress, and there are also improvements at the level of the campaign. And that's despite the fact that political parties are often muzzled during the process, during the electoral period, but there is still the possibility for everyone to campaign.
Whereas in the past, international organizations oversaw the process of almost all elections on the continent, African states are now less requesting supervision from international actors.
Africans are in the process of taking ownership of their governance in general, and of their elections too. The organization that I represent here, the Pan-African Electoral Assistance Institute, is a clear example where the African elite, women and men, have decided to observe African elections for Africans and by Africans. And I believe that this is a great initiative.
A major initiative that some see as an empowerment of African states that no longer wish to be subject to an external critical observation of their electoral process.
There is a major concern for the independence of those African states looking to work more internally, to find ways and means to precisely see how these electoral processes can be organized and improved. And without this sort of leaden shroud which materializes from time to time, in particular by these international organizations, that always intervene to give their point of view, and sometimes even to provide guidance.
As a result, the continent is starting to prove its mastery of electoral processes, not hesitating to limit the ballots in areas plagued by terrorism where the security of voters cannot be guaranteed.
It should be noted that there is at least a capacity for introspection by African states, which is done constantly so that they can really see how these various elections should be organized without hiccups, teeth gnashing, and ultimately without further trouble.
But there remains the question of the high cost of these popular consultations in Africa compared to other continents.
I can point to at least 3 factors that explain the cost. First one that people do not often think about is this whole set of measures that must be taken to gain the confidence of all stakeholders in the electoral process. Whether the confidence of political actors, citizens, or civil society organizations in the transparency and integrity of the process. The use of biometrics, for example, and just the equipment cost billions of CFA francs. Second element is the way resources are managed. I know very few countries in the sub-region where we can say that once the elections are over, there is a correct process of accountability for the way resources have been managed. And the third factor I would like to share is the question of our ability to conserve the non-perishable ingredients that are used in the management of elections. I'm, of course, talking about the ballot boxes and the voting booths.
Presidential, legislative, municipal or regional elections. These popular consultations show that in many countries, the boundaries have been shifting positively on the continent to the great satisfaction of the democracy under construction.
Without any doubt, there is no perfect election in the world. I had just mentioned the United States, which is known as a reference in democracy. We in Africa are making the effort. I think that 50 years from now, these people will come to learn how to organize good elections in Africa.
A vision of the continent's electoral future that matches that of all those who present Africa as the hope of tomorrow. A hope still conditioned by organizational constraints and obstacles of a more political nature. After Zambia, which defaulted on its payments, and Chad, which has become the first African country to request debt restructuring since the start of the COVID crisis, it will soon be Ethiopia's turn. The Addis government has announced the start of talks on this matter. The restructuring to come should go through the new framework adopted by the G20, to which Eurobond holders must now comply. In particular, it provides for equal treatment between all creditors. Ethiopia's total external debt stands at $27.8 billion. The mainland's airlines are trying to resist the crisis after the opening of a Bamako-Timbuktu link operated by Sky Mali. The national airline company ECare, Equatorial Congo Airlines, could be back in the game. The first 4 aircrafts in its fleet so far in overseas maintenance is back home. What bodes well for a gradual recovery, even if the authorities remain cautious. Launched in 2012, ECare has deployed a domestic and international network before ceasing its activities 4 years later, faced with financial and regulatory difficulties. Let's now head for Zambia for our second report. In this country located in the heart of southern Africa, breeding is one of the main activities of the inhabitants. To face the epidemics which decimate the herds, only one strategy: closely monitor the health of the animals, even if it means spending part of their income on it. This is our next report by Peter Yumi and Aurélie Turc.
Generations of smallholder farmers have tended their cattle in the rolling hills of Zambia's southern province. Simon Hilwindi's herd counts 110 animals, a large number by national standards, and today he's showing veterinary assistant Lilian Makosa his herd of cattle. Simon remembers the last serious foot and mouth disease outbreak in the region almost 10 years ago.
By that time I have 70 animals, and out of 70, 30 were dead. By that time I had lost a lot of money. I had lost 750,000 to control the problems, the diseases.
The equivalent today of hundreds of dollars. Today, he says, things are much better. He's benefited from a much improved animal health control system, due in large part to an internationally funded project. Foot and mouth diseases cause economic havoc. Almost 8 million cattle throughout the African continent were infected as recently as 2008. Estimates put the cost of that outbreak at over $15 million.
We struggled for a month. We did minimal production. It was very difficult to just pay wages.
Now, however, thanks in large measure to a 5-year, $20 million plus program, largely funded by the African Development Bank, the disease is much closer to being brought under control. Using digital pen technology, vet Lilian Makosa can alert the regional animal health authorities almost instantly if there's a new case of foot and mouth or any other bovine disease. Paired to a cell phone, the device can provide real-time information.
The reporting system has become very efficient now. Sometimes, if there is an emergency, I might not meet my boss there and then to report the issue. But with this one, wherever he is, he'll get the report.
Not just Zambia, but 4 neighboring countries have also benefited from the ADB's Trans-Boundary Animal Health Project, which aimed to improve not just the health of the region's livestock, but also the nation's cattle exports. All 5 countries have in the past failed to meet several livestock safety standards for such export markets as the European Union. Diseases respect no borders, and an outbreak in one nation can easily spread among herds and wildlife in neighboring countries. Wild buffalo are often carriers of diseases and remain a threat to domestic livestock.
The African Development Bank, through the SADC-TADZA project, has been very instrumental in helping Zambia in a number of ways. One, which top of the list, is a buffalo sampling exercise. The sampling was done, the viruses have been identified, and right now the strains have been identified and they've been profiled, and that information has been alleged to the laboratories that produce vaccines.
The 3-year program to capture and examine the buffalo cost well over $1 million. The Trans-Boundary Animal Disease Project brought neighboring countries' control and surveillance methods into line, and according to Zambian officials, has had a 70% success rate in stamping out the incidence of foot and mouth disease.
There's been the skills transfer from the expertise that came from outside that the bank hired to do the capture. Local people have since been trained in buffalo capture. So the benefit to Zambia is in excess of over $1 million in terms of money that was spent, but also the human capital that has been recreated by the virtue of the training that was done.
The revenue of farmers doubled. The live stock value chain was secured in terms of job creation and flux of live animals to the abattoirs and to the market, to the suppliers, and also to the consumer. In terms of trade regionally, some indications are about 10 to 15% increase as a result of the intervention of this project.
It's an export market that potentially is worth over $40 million to Zambia. And consumer confidence in the safety and quality of the meat available from abattoirs has also been helped. A clean bill of health is good news, therefore, for the St. Mary's Dairy Cooperative in the Monze district in the southwest of Zambia.
After 2 years, we increased 1,500, it was one day. This time, we are getting double. So we opened a new center, as you can see. So this time we are producing 3,000 liters in a day.
And every dollar has counted as the hunt for vaccines against specific diseases has been pursued in the laboratories as well.
Here I'm just preparing the sample, extracting DNA, manually.
But the samples need to be analysed and the vaccine developed, and here too there was money made available, allowing researchers not only to identify the origins of the disease, but also to speed up the process. Jaspin Hibajin is typical of livestock farmers in the Monze district. He owns 40 cattle and spends about 10% of his income, about $25, on having his animals vaccinated. With a growing family, he knows his livelihood depends on the health of his livestock. If his cattle remain free from disease, he'll be able to sell them and reinvest. Jaspin Hibajina, Elina Mawinga and hundreds of other smallhold farmers across southern Africa know the future can never be guaranteed. But with the continuing support of the researchers, the scientists and the veterinarians in the field, their chances of success have never been higher.
Welcome back to the second part of our show. Let's now talk about this landmark judgment in Geneva against corruption in the commodities world. Franco-Israeli businessman Benny Steinmetz was sentenced at the end of January to 5 years of prison and 46 million euros in compensation for having paid nearly $10 million in bribes to Mamadi Touré, the fourth wife of the late president of Guinea, Lansana Conté. He was thus able to obtain mining permits in one of the largest iron deposits in the world, the Simandu mine. To talk about this case, which mixes tax havens, bogus companies and involves large international mining groups, I'm joined today by Géraldine Viré from the Swiss NGO Public Eye. Géraldine Viré, hello, and thank you for joining me on Business Africa to discuss the Benny Steinmetz trial. What are the main lessons to be learned from this judgment for the commodities business community?
This conviction comes as a sanction for extremely serious acts of corruption in one of the poorest countries in the world. I think that the first thing that we must be aware of is who is the victim in this case. And it is the Guinean population which has never received the fruits of these exploitation permits, of these riches. This condemnation sends a strong signal to the entire raw materials sector, which is very exposed to risks of corruption. And the signal, in this case, it is even stronger, since three links in the chain of corruption have been condemned in Switzerland to different degrees. We have Mr. Steinmetz, who presents himself as a benefactor, a pro-African, an ambassador of his group. We have his intermediary in Guinea, who was the privileged contact of the president's wife. And then we have his faithful administrator in Switzerland, who was making the financial arrangements from Geneva. She is actually the one who allowed the establishment of the corruptive scheme. And from a Swiss perspective, this condemnation is also organized corruption in Switzerland, made in Switzerland. We now see that there is finally a strong will from the Swiss justice system to put an end to the impunity of commodity companies.
Well, your organization has indicated that the judgment should not overlook the extreme difficulty for Swiss and foreign prosecutors to investigate such complex cases. What we see is a strong will from the Swiss justice system to investigate such cases, but it comes up against many obstacles. If we take the Steinmetz case, we see that there are hundreds of binders, hundreds of thousands of pieces, different jurisdictions involved, years of investigations to succeed. I think it is illusory to think that justice alone will be able to settle these types of cases, these types of problems, because for a conviction like the one of Mr. Steinmetz and his acolytes in Geneva, there are many cases, in fact, that will never end before the court. There are so many of them, and if we want to prevent such corruption scandals, it is clear to us that the Swiss authorities must really take measures upstream, preventive measures to finally fill in the legislative gaps that facilitate these criminal practices. Finally, what actions could be taken in Africa itself to curb these attempts at corruption in the mining sector? What is clear is that the government of countries rich in natural resources have a large share of responsibility too. So it's imperative to fight against corruption in these countries too by strengthening laws, institutions, either at the central level, at the local level, to guarantee better management of the raw materials sector, more transparency, for example, with regard to the allocation of mining permits,
income from the sale of raw materials, and what is central is that the population must benefit from it in a fair way. And I believe that civil society in Switzerland, as in Africa, has a very important role to play in holding the government and large companies to account.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And we also see a greater intolerance towards the financial irregularities sometimes detected in development programs. This is how the World Bank just suspended the first payment of $100 million to an education program in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The decision came after a report by the Congolese Inspector General of Finance on suspected cases of fraud and corruption in the country's education sector. Between virtual fashion shows and the absence of international travelers, the fashion industry has been at half-mast in recent months. But it seems that this industry wants to get closer to its African clients, where it hopes to find the emerging market of tomorrow. This is how Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, and its thriving middle class are in the crosshairs of the foreign brands, among which Giordano. The Hong Kong brand has just opened its third store over there. And of course, for those who dream of launching their own business venture, it's not just the business plan that matters. Money remains the sinews of war, and borrowing from a banking institution is not easy. In Tanzania, a microcredit program helps future entrepreneurs obtain the necessary funding to make their projects a reality. Ariski Ben Mokhtar has the full story.
Rabo Tobias is the manager of several small companies in Kibamba, near Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. He's a happy man. His hardware store is a godsend for the local inhabitants and craftsmen in the village. Customers can find all they need for their building work. Rabo also owns this bicycle and accessory shop in a nearby neighborhood. But none of this would have been possible on Rabo's meager savings. It all happened thanks to a $65,000 loan from the Access Bank, a microfinance pioneer.
It's a business of which can give me profit to boost my life.
Rabo Tobias proved himself to be a good businessman, and the Access Bank lent him more money to set up this ironworks, specializing in the fabrication of metal doors and windows. He also employed welders, welcome news in a region with high unemployment levels. Rabo savors his success, but makes sure the community benefits as well. He funded the school with his own money. The project took 7 years to complete.
It's to assist the community of this area. It's to create an employment among the community, among the people.
Another itinerary and another example of microloans at work in poor countries at the other end of Tanzania. The story of Agnes Jacob Molel. After her husband's death, Agnes decided to start raising pigs to earn a living. With a loan approved by a local agent from the Access Bank, she bought 10 piglets. She was soon making a profit and paying back her loan.
Six months is enough to sell. It's big enough to sell. You get a profit. If it is big, you can get 200,000 shillings. If it is big, even more.
In next to no time, Agnes Jacob Molel has become a true entrepreneur. To cut costs, she prepares the pig's fodder herself from potato peels and other vegetable waste.
They eat, they become fat. In kilos, more kilos.
Agnes's determination to succeed caught the attention of the Access Bank's local agent, who keeps a close eye on her progress.
So the time I come here, because we financed this lady, Agnes Molel, so we want to make sure that the business is going smoothly. So time to time we come here to monitor the business, to see whether the business is going well and she's doing well.
The managers at the Access Bank were equally impressed and granted her a further loan of $1,400. With this new injection of cash, Agnes was able to take on 2 new assistants and diversify her activities. Now, as well as raising pigs, she grows mushrooms using banana leaves and rice husks.
I've been really pleasantly surprised at how they've developed their own skills in business. They may not be able to give you a detailed description of what is the forward cash flow or the cost of an interest rate, but they understand their business remarkably well.
Rabo Tobias and Agnes Jacob Molel are living proof that Africans can take care of business themselves. However, whether in Tanzania or elsewhere on the continent, loans are not easily accessible to all. The microcredit system may well help the continent close the development gap. In recent years, a traditionally agricultural country like Tanzania has been able to establish an economic fabric, thanks to the involvement of private sector banks from home and overseas.
I believe that microfinance is the key to the future of African businesses. There are so many businesses who so far have been unable to get any access to financial services, that if we can provide them with some of the basic services, not just loans and savings, but even payment services, so that they're able to make payments. If we can provide those services, I am sure that the micro-entrepreneurs and the microbanks themselves will benefit. It's a win-win situation.
The United Nations Organization and the African Union are advocating the development of microfinance in Africa. Although it is not the solution to all of the continent's problems, it is certainly one of the most effective ways of improving the economic outlook and fighting poverty. African development funds such as the AfriCap, financed by a combination of international development institutions or RegMIFA, a regional investment fund promoting micro, small and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa, received backing from European nations. RegMIFA is particularly active in Tanzania. Over $15 million have been lent to microfinance institutions.
Well, it's now time to reward our loyal viewers of Business Africa. It's up to you to answer to the following questions. If you're drawn among those who have given the correct answers, you will win $150. This is game number 544, so listen carefully to the two questions that follow, and good luck. First question. How many cattle were affected by the 2008 foot and mouth disease outbreak in Africa? 800,000, 2 million or 8 million? Second question. In which country does Agnes Jacob Molel live? Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya? You know the answers. You can participate now by going to our website africaonair.com, answer the questions, fill out your form, and good luck. And of course, don't forget to include your contact details, name, address, telephone, email, and the number of the game you are entering with the answers, of course. This game, for example, is game number 544. The winner will receive $150 as our winner this week. Congratulations, you gave the correct answers to our game number 540. Here are the details. First question. What is onchocerciasis? Answer: an eye infection. Second question. What decision should the bank wait for to pledge the assets in the event of default on a business loan in the OHADA space? Answer: none. Well, that's it. Business Africa is over for today. I'll see you next week, same time, same channel, for a new edition of Initiative Africa. We'll meet Lucille Cornet-Vernet, who will tell us about her encounter with Artemisia, a plant used in the prevention and treatment of malaria. In the meantime, you can catch this program on our website, africaonair.com, as well as on all our social media channels. Feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa TV show. Well, take care of yourselves and see you next week. Bye-bye.